I want to say thank you for joining the Post Beat podcast. And my name is Greg Dunmore. If you are tuning in for the very first time, and if you've been watching before, then hopefully you're a fan. And after you see this show with this exciting guest that we're going to introduce you to, you will certainly become a fan of the Post Beat podcast. Now, we're filming this podcast live and in living color at the glamorous, gorgeous Inn at 97 Winder. And that's about a stone's throw from Little Caesars Arena in the heart of downtown Detroit. What makes Detroit great? So many things in terms of this breath of fresh air. But if you want to define a city as being world class, I would think of no place that does it better than the Inn at 97 Winder. It is absolutely a gem in the center of downtown Detroit. Now, as I said before, that the Post Beat podcast, if you're not a fan, hopefully you're going to be a fan because of the exciting guests that we bring live in the living color. And today's guest is Eligah Boykin, and I've been a fan of Eligah for a very long time because the background is so absolutely fascinating. He is a true Renaissance man, an author, a painter, an athlete. He's a man, an intellectual. You're all of those wonderful things, but above all, you're a very nice person. Eligah, the journey. Let us know from the many things that certainly define you as a person of many talents. We're going to talk to you today about being an author. And as a little boy, did you say to yourself, I'm going to grow up not to be a football player, not to be an engineer, but an author?
Well, actually, I want to be a baseball player, but I don't know, after a certain point, you just see that your talents go in a certain direction and whatnot. Because in music class, when I was in elementary school, when the teacher got tired of banging on the piano or she got called to the office, she'd tell the kids that, okay, we're going to have talent show, and so what do you want to do? You want somebody to come up and sing, or you want somebody to tell you a story? Yeah, we want Elijah to tell us a story, because I do the sound effects and the screams and stuff like that. So I get up and tell a story, and they would ask me to do that, every time that she would go to the office. So I started to get the idea that, I must be pretty good at this if all the kids in the class keep saying they want to hear me tell a story. And things just really developed from that, and I decided to do other things, with the storytelling medium, especially when I got involved with Marvel Comics, in the Marvel Universe. Mm-hmm.
So now, obviously, one of your gifts among many is storyteller, and to take the oral version of what a storyteller would be about and to put it into words, you had to master the language. So did you always have a love with words in terms of the written word?
I was in a Christmas play one time, and I was a kid. I couldn't have been more than like 6 or 7 years old, but I noticed I felt really comfortable on stage. And that was really the beginning of it. It wasn't so much that I was just in words. I was interested in storytelling or being an actor, an assistant storyteller. I really felt comfortable in that milieu or that world. And I've been doing something of that nature ever since, Mm-hmm.
Now hi, Susan. So wonderful that you're joining us from Atlanta or close to Atlanta, Georgia. I know the weather has to be very nice there, but guess what? Nice though the weather is, to be at the Inn at 97 Winder with just a little trickling of snow and you're in this wonderful setting that really bespeaks what the holidays are all about. Couldn't think of a better place to talk to this gentleman, a writer, because I'm thinking about the setting that we're in right now, and I can see you in a smoking jacket, not smoking though, but still I could see you reading and writing. Do you get that kind of inspiration by being in this setting?
Well, you get inspiration from many different sources. I put it that way just to be, PG about it. But, this is a nice space or atmosphere, but it's funny the things that stimulate you to write, because I know what started me off was the stuff that I read in Marvel comic books, television series, Man from U.N.C.L.E., James Bond series, stuff like that, adventure tales, hero tales, reading about Cowboy Sam and John Henry and the double jointed steam drill, that type of stuff, and sometimes you say to yourself, well, that's good, but I think I could do a little bit better than that. And it's that point where you say, I think I could do a little bit better than that you try your hand at it. And then, you decide for yourself after you finish the work of storytelling and whatnot, okay, well, this measures up to what I've seen, or it doesn't quite measure. This is a little bit harder than I thought it was, and that's how it works.
Now, what superhero, you said Marvel, was something that inspired you? What superhero among the many did you identify most with when you were a youngster?
Spider-Man, especially Spider-Man issue 3, I think, when he fought the Sandman. You have these times in life where you have an experience where something you read or a story that you're experiencing thoroughly duplicates your reality. It just puts you in a state of bliss in a whole nother world. And that issue where he was this nerdy science kid, and all the kids were bullying him and whatnot, but he had this secret identity. He was actually Spider-Man, and nobody really admired him, for the information that he had or the skills he had as a scientist or anything like that. It's only when he came in his costume to whip the Sandman's behind, he's duking it out, that the kids cheered him and whatnot. And while he was in his Spider-Man costume, I remember the thought balloon was, I wonder if these kids know they're actually cheering the nerdy kid that they've been bullying, Peter Parker, and they didn't know. It's like it was a total reverse of what he was experiencing, as an ordinary teenage high school kid. And I thought that was really fascinating.
Peter Parker in the movie version, and the latest chapter of the Spider-Man saga is now Miles Morales, who is the newest Spider-Man. And it's really fascinating because he is part of what this whole new generation, I think, is about. What do you think about Miles Morales as the newest Spider-Man, carrying on what Peter Parker started?
Well, I like the mentor relationship that he has with Iron Man. That's like a new twist. I haven't seen that, before. But the thing that was interesting, if people don't realize, is that Stan Lee was sitting in a director's chair. He had a picture of him in a director's chair in the comic books way back in the 60s. He had thought all this out in advance. And then people didn't realize, especially college kids, that what you had in the comic books was the equivalent of storyboards for movies. Because Jack Kirby, one of the artists, he made the pictures in the panels particularly cinematic because he felt he wanted his comic books to compete with the movies at that time. And to see it go through all these fits and starts, and now here it is in the 21st century, you're into, the Marvel universe as cinema, really particularly more than even as comic books. It's just the final culmination of what Stan Lee and Jack Kirby and Steve Ditko wanted to do. So It's amazing.
Oh, Gerald, Pastor Gerald, who's always a blessing with his spiritual self, watching us. So, we're just blessed that we've got some real good people that are putting their vibe, and I can feel it no matter where they are on this planet. But you know what, Susan, she asked about filmmaking. And of course, we're not filmmakers, but we are lovers of cinema and filmmaking, very good filmmaking. And you've got a new book, Towards a New Cinema. And this I find to be an absolutely intriguing title, Toward a New Cinema. The title came from where?
Well, actually, see, I was in Blockbuster Video, and I covered this to some extent, in the opening chat to the reader, which is in the book. I was in Blockbuster Video over there on Livernois, and I think it's St. Maria or maybe Margarita. But, I was standing in Blockbuster, and they had the different covers for the different movies. At that time, it was video cassette rather than DVDs, which is what we have today. But I stood there and I realized that I knew basically what all the plots to all the movies on the walls were going to revolve around. There's going to be some type of sexual content. There's going to be some type of violent content, And I knew from my studies of art history basically what you had in these movies was a reiteration of the Circus Maximus, okay? In other words, they were using these movies as the circuses for the masses, It was a kind of cultural conditioning. And I had an epiphany, I think it was earlier, where I asked myself, what did I think were the 10 best movies I had ever seen? And then a little voice inside me said, okay, what is the common denominator of these 10 movies that you've chosen?
Wait, you know what? I'm going to cut into this because I want you to tell the audience and just give us a laundry list and tell us the 10 best movies that you have seen, so we get a little better sense of what your taste factor is like in terms of cinema. Name them for us, the 10 best films, and then we'll continue the conversation.
Well, most of the films that, I consider the 10 best, other people have, considered them to be that as well. 2001: A Space Odyssey, because that really, stimulated my interest to understand more about the fine arts and how you can use abstraction to move a person emotionally without them being to pinpoint what it is that's actually moving them.
Number 2,
Citizen Kane, because, there you got a film that it's under 2 hours, but it seems like it's much longer. And that's covered in the book.
That's Orson Welles.
That's Orson Welles, when he first tried to make his hit against, William Randolph Hearst. And I've mentioned that, and the fact that maybe he might have been better off chronicling the life of Babe Ruth rather than William Randolph Hearst.
Number 3,
I would have to say Under Fire, okay? It's a movie about a revolution in one of the Latin American countries, and it deals really particularly with myth and fact as it relates to photojournalism. What has the bigger effect on the masses, because they create a martyr on the spot, in Under Fire. And it's really interesting because the guy's dead, but they kind of mock him up as if he's still alive because they need him for a couple more days to get the revolution, to keep the momentum of the revolution going.
Number 4.
I'd say The Matrix, because here you're dealing with Plato's allegory of the cave, of the shadows that people emerge out of, because you got this lead character. He's living in this illusory world, but he doesn't know it's illusory. And he has this fellow who's sort of a mentor to him, I think, Morpheus, played by Lawrence Fishburne, who sort of leads him step by step out of his illusion into what the world really is, and I like that interplay between reality and illusion. I thought it was really well treated in the way that Plato had suggested it could be treated in his allegory.
Number 5.
I like this film. It was Harlem Nights, because the atmosphere of it, mostly the fact that you had these kings of comedy, Eddie Murphy, Red Fox,
don't forget Della Reese from Detroit. Don't forget Della Reese from Detroit.
Yeah, I hadn't forgotten about her.
A shocking Della Reese.
And Richard Pryor. Just the fact that you had these 3 comic geniuses, all in one film. And the fact that the story was really good. And black people sort of outwit white people in the end. I thought it was a great, guilty pleasure.
Number 6.
Number 6 is probably Tanaka. It's an African film. It was made by this Australian director, but it's about this guy who has this moral, spiritual dilemma where he has to go against the dictates of his tribe and even fight the witch doctor who is supposed to be the spiritual leader of his particular tribe in order to get justice. It's a great film.
7.
7. I'd have to say Black Panther recently. It covered a lot of themes, I thought, that hadn't been treated successfully before. But it did it in a way where it still suggested that a person could use their imagination to imagine an ideal scene.
Number 8.
Let me see. Well, we've covered pretty much all the films that I can think of. Probably Ant-Man, because to me, there's a lot of dark edge stuff that the adults have put to, the comic book medium. What it really wasn't intended to that. Comic books were intended to be a bridge so that parents could talk to their kids, about what their issues and their concerns were, in a storytelling sort of way. But Ant-Man is a comic book that puts the comic back in comic book. In other words, it's for adults and children. So I thought that was a really, beautiful thing.
Number 9.
Last year at Marion Bad because it's a puzzle that if you try to solve it intellectually, you'll get nowhere. You just go around in circles. But if you try to solve it morally, then you understand exactly what's going on from the very first frame onward. And it sort of suggests the difference between exercising intelligence and exercising moral sense.
Number 10.
Number 10. There's a film that I remember that, Gravity. Gravity was a great film. Just the way it was shot. I thought they did new things with, the technology of film, where you really got a sense of being out in space. And it could have been about nothing. It still would have been an entertaining 2 hours just because of the way that, they moved in space. It just seemed so true to life. It had a verisimilitude about it that I thought was really fascinating.
I think someone said that you can find a lot about a man by the liquor he drinks. If they didn't say it, I'm saying it now, but you can also find a lot about a man because of the movies that he watches, and that makes you indeed a very smart and fascinating man, because those films and your articulation certainly give great insight on an intellectual spirit that defines who you are. And in this book, Towards a New Cinema, you know what, we're going to play a little game here, because I'm going to just open up whatever page, and whatever page I land on, we're going to talk about that particular film, okay? Mm-hmm. Let's see, on page 74, House of Games. Mm-hmm. Why did you come back? In a nutshell, why should we care?
Well, this is a good film because it talks about the difference between an academic personality and a so-called street personality, and the attraction between the two. Because there is an attraction between a man and a woman there. But this lady, she's taken into, she's taken in by these con men, and at first she outwits them. But then for some reason, she's caught up in the allure and glamour of their lifestyle. And she comes back, and everybody wonders, why has she come back? When, in the first place, they were trying to take advantage of her. And for her to come back and say, okay, you didn't do it good enough. Try and take advantage of me again, But the whole thing is she felt more human around them than she felt in her academic setting. And I thought that was really fascinating. Then, of course, you wonder what was lacking in her academic section, where she felt more like a woman around these con men than she had felt, being a teacher and an author. That's what's in House of Games.
Now, this film, December 14th, 2014, and you talk about Toward a New Cinema. Do you find that the movies of yesteryear are better, just different, or not as insightful as the new cinema, things that would have come out from maybe 2014 and beyond?
I find generally that the films of the past, which I see mostly on Turner Classic Movies, they have more heart. They'll make you well up with tears and whatnot. Whereas the films of today, they seem to be more about desensitization. How do you pronounce it? Desensitized, put it that way.
To desensitize,
it's about the person being desensitized and not being able to feel, and not being able to care, and not being able to have compassion or to reach out for others. And that's the nuance.
So the movies of yesteryear had more heart and soul. Now we're going to go to another movie. Oh, My Man Godfrey with Godfrey Cambridge. Well, no, wait a second. That's not true. I'm saying My Man. I'm thinking of Godfrey Cambridge, but no, that's a mistake on my part. Yeah, this 1936, From Riches to Rags, Again, to Riches Again. It says June 8, 2017. That's when you saw it. The movie came out in 1936.
Mm-hmm. Well, I saw it as a kid, actually, but this was a great movie because this guy, these rich people found him in a garbage dump, and they were looking, they were playing a little party game. They had to, cruise around in their Rolls Royces and whatnot and find a forgotten man. And this was during the Depression. So they found this guy named Garvey Parks, at this city dump. And so they took him, the way you would take on a scavenger hunt. That's what it was, a scavenger hunt. They took him back to the party and said, okay, here's our forgotten man, And then he speaks to them, and when he talks, he sounds like a college professor. He said, well, I don't mind visiting you, but I've got to return to my dump now because there's a better class of people there. And I always thought that was a great line. The fact that, riches don't define your character, especially material riches. What you've developed, in your life in an inner sense, that's what, determines what your character is and whether you're truly a rich person. So it was a great film. And the fact that he was able to figure his way out of the dump and into a place where not only did he rise up, but everybody that he associated with, the hobos and the tramps, he was able to take them with him into an enterprise, an entrepreneur type of business, where, that they were in a better situation now because he had worked his way out of, rags to riches.
Well, and I see that in your narrative on My Man Godfrey, 1936. It says, there are many figures from history whose lives I wish I could lead. Among them, Nat King Cole, Jackie Robinson, Booker T. Washington, Muhammad Ali, Nelson Mandela, and others. Is there anybody currently that is living that would be a life that if you could maybe step into their shoes for just a moment or two or three, who might that be? Someone who is living and breathing and inspires you to want to live their life, maybe.
Well, it's best to live your own life, of course, but if you naturally, you fantasize when Barack Obama, to me, is a good choice, because people talk about his accomplishments on the political scene, but to me, the thing that stood out about him was he was the only person that talked about exercising the moral imagination, and to me, that was like a high watermark, in his career, and it was an epiphany for me, because people tend to think that when you exercise your imagination, you're going to go all wild and, go with abandon, and think about how you're going to revenge yourself against people or do all sorts of kooky things that you couldn't do, in real life. But the whole thing of using your imagination to exercise or to exercise morality or to create some type of interface with aesthetics and ethics, I thought was a beautiful thing. I'd never heard anybody speak about that before.
Oh, wow. Now, on page 76, I Am Rath, John Travolta grieves about murder and corruption, May 23rd, 2016. That's when you saw the movie. This is, yes, but it says, this is Travolta's new film. I went with my sister, Joe Boykin, and her friend, Greg Dummer. That's in case you're reading it, so you know who the friend is. As they were planning to interview one of the members of the cast for their morning television show. That happens to be Postbeat.tv, the award-winning Postbeat.tv. The fellow's name was Robert Forte Shannon III, and he proved afterwards to be a very genial fellow who deserves every success. That movie, I love that movie. Let me know your thoughts about it. And I also know that because we were there to support Robert Seven Shannon, who is a fascinating actor and a name to remember, your feelings about I Am Rath.
Actually, I thought it was pretty formulaic. It was a revenge movie, what they call return and vengeance. The guy had to have some type of really tragic trauma happened to him in the early part of the film. Then it's all about how you're going to calculate to get back against the guys who had, visited this tragedy upon him. I thought the action and the acting was interesting. It's just that I've seen that revenge ethic done, that film, The Knocker, that I mentioned, to me, that had a little bit more heart to it. The fact that this guy was the African tribesman trying to revenge his wife and his daughter who had been, brutally murdered, really, so this guy could be a champion stick fighter. I thought that there was a little bit more to that. But I Am Rath, I thought was interesting,
Well, you know what? Time goes by so quickly. We have 30 minutes, and zoop, and the time went by. That means that we've got to have you back because this book is fascinating toward a new cinema, and this is not your only published work. And I am so impressed by you, Elijah, as a poet, as a painter. I'm a collector of your work. I've got a picture that you did, a painting that you did actually in my home, and it's a person that they're holding dollar bills, and people see, they think it's me. It's not me, but it will be, yeah. So therefore, we're going to have you come back so we can talk more toward a new cinema, and you got other books and you got other projects, because I was blessed many years ago to have sat next to the great James Baldwin when I was a student at Cornell University. And I really, to be very honest, didn't have a sense of his profound greatness. But guess what? I do have a sense of your profound greatness. And I'm not going to allow this interview to not go into a part two because I was not able to interview James Baldwin. I was able to sit next to him and talk to him. But guess what? I am now able to interview Elijah Boykin, a Renaissance man, a man certainly that inspires many of us for so many reasons. And I want you to tell this audience, and I want the Spirit to just hit you. And in 30 seconds, your success is based on, and one secret of success that you know will inspire would be what?
It's not about you. It's about the people that you want to give joy and pleasure to in your life. You have your gifts, but sometimes you think that, your gifts are what's going to win you out. It really isn't. It's how you relate to people, and how they assist you in lifting you up as you lift them up that makes the difference.
Words of wisdom, and you're watching the Post Beat podcast. I'm Greg Dunmore, and this is being filmed at the beautiful Inn at 97 Winder. And if you've not had a chance to see the Inn at 97 Winder, you've got to make a point to come and visit. It is a wonderful place to experience why Detroit is a absolutely wonderful, great place to be. Toward a new cinema, Elijah Boykin, I thank you for joining us. Where can you get the book?
Go to Amazon.com. You can also go to Ex Libris and pick up a copy of it. I suggest a Kindle right now because we're working to knock the price down. I also want to thank Greg Dunmore because he and my sister are really pioneers in the field of photojournalism, and they're doing a lot of new things that I think are going to help towards not just a new cinema, but a new media as well. One that uplifts people and makes people reach perspectives in life.
As I said before, a brilliant man, and that's one reason. And we're going to have you back. Elijah, thank you so much, and we're going to see you again.
Oh, definitely.
And thank you for joining us.